Hello everyone, my name is KK, and today we are making a keypad combination lock that not only requires you to press the correct buttons, but also requires you to press them in the correct order. And before we hop into this, I just want to give you a glimpse into what we are actually getting into. It is a bit of a mess. A lot of this is just cosmetics and a touch of flair here and there. So I am just going to start with the key components to making this thing function. And then from there, everything will just be optional. So as usual, the first thing you want to do is start with getting your room set up and figure out where you want to place your keypad. We're going to bring in some buttons, and you do want to do this with buttons. You can do this with pressure plates if you want to do items. That could be a pretty fun interaction, but we are just going to do buttons. And for this demonstration, we are going to set it up like a keypad. You'll see the 1 through 9 and then the 0 below it, which will be right here in the center. And then one additional button right here in the corner. This is just going to be to reset it. And just so we can differentiate this one from the rest, I am going to go ahead and change the color. I like that blue. And then we want to grab a switch gizmo, and these are going to go above the 10 buttons. We are not going to do the one that we just changed to blue. Just like that. And now we want to go ahead and link up all of these 10 buttons to the switches. And in the settings of all of these links, we want to change this to activate only. We don't want it to toggle on and off. We don't want it to deactivate any at all. We just need it to activate these switch gizmos. And yes, we do have to do this to all 10. Now this is a good time to go ahead and figure out what your combination is going to be. For me, it's going to be this one in the middle, and then from the left, middle to the right. My combination is only going to be 4 digits long. You can, however, set this up to be as many as you want it to be. You can even set this up to have duplicating buttons within your combination. I will actually talk about that at the end because it is a little bit of a different setup. Now we need to add switch gates. However long your combination is, you need to have 1 fewer switch gate. Since mine is going to be 4 long, I only need 3 switch gates. We also need all these switch gates to be set to all. And if you saw my last video on the switch sequence puzzle, this part is going to be pretty familiar to you. We are going to connect our first button up to the first switch gate, and we are going to hop in and turn off all behaviors. And when your link is grayed out like this, all it means is that it has no behaviors whenever it is activated. So when the switch is turned on or off, it is going to send no signals to this switch gate. However, this link is still going to be calculated within the equation whenever this is trying to figure out if all links are active. Now we're going to grab our second switch and link it up to the same switch gate. We're going to hop into this settings. We want to leave evaluate on switched on, and we want to turn off all behaviors on switched off. So now when this is switched on, this is going to evaluate to see if every link is connected or activated. And when it is switched off, it is going to do nothing. And then we want to grab that same switch and we are going to link it up to our second switch gate. And we're going to hop into these settings and we're going to turn off all behaviors. And then our third one, we want to hook up to the same switch gate. We're going to hop into here, leave the evaluate on switched on and turned off behaviors on switched off. Then we're going to repeat this one more time for our last switch gate. Now we're going to grab some more switch gizmos and we want to add 1 switch per switch gate. I've only got 3, so I only need 3 switches. If you have more switch gates, make sure to add 1 for each switch gate. And then we want to link these up directly to them. And we want to leave the link settings to the default to activate on passed and deactivate on failed. So now we need to grab 1 more switch gate and we're going to place this one off to the side. I actually like to place this one up high. And we need to go in here and change this settings to all as well. And then we're going to hook up all 3 of these switches directly to this switch gate. And for the settings of all of these, we want to turn off all behaviors. So now whether these switches are turned on or off, it is not going to tell this to evaluate. And we want to link this up to our door. And in the setting of that link, I do like to have my doors locked. So I do unlock, open, lock. And for our conditions failed, it really doesn't need to do anything at all. Then we're going to go ahead and make sure this door is locked. Now we need to grab our counter with conditions, and I am going to put this directly above. And within your settings to this counter with conditions, you want it to be equal to however long your combination is. Mine's 4, so I'm going to set this equal to 4. And when you're using the equal comparison, it does not matter if you do condition changes or value changes. And for this next part, I want to be the nat, because it'll just be easier to see. We're going to link up all 10 of our original switches to this counter with conditions. And then within the settings of each of these links we just made, we want it to be switched on to increment by 1 and switched off to be none, which is its default setting. So now what this counter with conditions does is it's going to count up to 4 whenever it's got 4 inputs, and then it's going to send a signal out to this switch gate. This signal is going to tell it to evaluate on conditions passed, and is going to do nothing on conditions failed. So far, what we have, once you press your 4 buttons in order, it is going to activate your 3 switches, or however many you have. This is going to leave these open. They are not going to evaluate because they are grayed out. And then at the same time, once you have 4 inputs put into this counter with conditions, this link is going to tell it to evaluate, and it is going to see if every single connection has been made or is active. And if they have been, it is going to send a signal to open that door. If they haven't been, it's going to do nothing. So if I press the wrong 4 buttons, this is still going to say, hey, you got 4 inputs. I'm going to tell this thing to evaluate. It's going to see if every other input has been activated. If not, nothing's going to happen. So right now, if we hop into play mode, we can see that this does work. If you press the right 4 buttons, the door opens. So back in design mode, you want to come up here and grab a timer, place this in another open spot. We want to grab a signal from our switch gate to our timer. We want to jump into the settings of that, and on conditions passed, we don't need anything to happen. On conditions fail, we need the timer to start. Within the settings of our timer, you can change your time to be however long you want it to be. I do like to have a little bit of time on this whenever I am doing sounds and other inputs, just to kind of give them an opportunity to go off. But if you want this to reset as fast as possible, the shortest time we can do is 1 second, and that is fine. Turn off start on play. So now what this link is saying is when this gets its 4 signals and it tells this to evaluate, but they're wrong, it is going to send that signal down here on the conditions failed to start this timer. And now we create a link from this timer to every single switch, our 10 original switches plus the 3 for our switch gates. And we need to hop into the settings of each and every single one of these links we just made and change it to deactivate. So whenever this timer goes off, it is going to deactivate every switch. It's really only going to deactivate the switches you've activated, but there's no way of knowing which ones you're going to deactivate. So we need to introduce this redundancy to make sure that it deactivates every single switch, or at least that it's telling it to deactivate every single switch. And the last link we need to make is from this timer to this counter with conditions. And then we're going to hop into nap mode. So we can hop up here and get into the settings of this link. And we want to set value to be 0. So now when this timer counts down, it's 1 second. It is going to reset this value down to 0 so it can receive its 4 inputs again. And we're going to test this out in motion. 2, 3, 4. I turned on the timer settings so I can see it. And if we hit our 4 right ones, it works. So that means that the counter was able to reset. Otherwise, our correct input wouldn't have been able to work because this would have had received a total of 8 inputs. And this thing is only set to go off once it hits 4. And the reason we're using the counter with conditions here instead of using a switch gate with its settings set to at least 4 is because whenever you have this set to at least 4, this means it can be activated on every input above 4. So you hit 4, you hit 5, you hit 6, it can still activate. And what that means is you can come in here, or your player can come in here and just spam buttons and hope that they get the right sequence, because it'll never fully reset. It's just going to keep restarting that timer every time it receives an additional input over 4. So this is the basic setup. This is how you get your keypad combination to work to open a door or a chest or whatever you need to do with it. Obviously, it's lacking in visuals and sounds and all that extra fun flair, which I will go over in just a moment. But this is your basic setup. You can now set up whatever you need to with it. So now let's say I want my combination to reuse the same button twice. For example, let's say I want to do middle, top left, top middle, right, and then top middle again. For this, we want to hop in and grab our counter with conditions. We're just going to place it off to the side to make our linking a little more visible. And we want to link it up directly from the button that we are going to have 2 inputs from. And for this link setting, we are going to leave it to increment by 1, which is its default setting. And for the setting of the counter with conditions, we want to change it to 2 because it is going to require 2 button presses in order for it to go off. Then we are going to grab a switch gate. We're going to place it just in front of the counter with conditions. We're going to link the counter up to the switch gate, change these settings to be all, hop into the link settings. We are going to set it to evaluate on conditions passed and to have no behavior on conditions failed. And just like the switch gates before it, we do want to hook up the previous switch gizmo to our new switch gate, and we're going to hop into the settings and we want no behaviors. And so just like these before, it is going to do nothing whenever this switch is activated, but whenever this gets its two inputs, it is going to tell it to evaluate to see if all connections are active. And then we want to grab one more switch gizmo. We're just going to place it right here, link our switch gate to that. When conditions pass, we want it to activate, and we want no behaviors whenever conditions failed. And just like these three switch gizmos, we want to create a link from it up to our final switch gate, and within the settings of this one, we want it to have no behaviors. And then we want to create a link from the timer down to our new switch, and we want it to deactivate on time elapsed. Then we want to create a link from the timer down to our new counter with conditions, and we want to set it to be set value to 0. So just like the other switch gizmos and switch gates, this is going to do nothing to that switch gate up there. On time elapsed, it is going to reset to turn off. And for this counter with conditions, on time elapsed, it is going to reset to 0 so that it requires its two inputs again to activate this switch gate, which activates this switch. And now the last thing we want to do is hop back into nap mode so we can fly up here, grab this counter with conditions and change its value to be 5 because we now require 5 inputs in order to open the door. Now let's hop into play mode and give this a test. This was our old sequence and our new one. And nothing happened. You can see our timer went off, so for some reason this is registering as failed even though it is getting all signals, so let's do some tests. A great way to test if your inputs are being activated is to use lights. We are going to add one up to the counter with conditions we added as well as all of our switches. And we're just going to link those directly to them. And now this is going to give us a visual of what is actually happening. You can see those are lighting up right. And so if we do the last one, those two also lit up. So it is actually working correctly, but something in here is telling it that it is failing and it is sending a signal to start the timer to deactivate everything. And I do believe I know what the issue is. There are some weird things that happen with the counter with conditions. And I think the best way to fix it is to just delete this link from the switch. And instead we're going to link directly from that button up to the counter with conditions. And we are going to leave it at the default settings to increment by 1. You know, if I'm correct, this should actually fix it. And voila. So for right now, until this does get fixed, whatever button you are requiring two inputs from needs to be directly connected to the counter with conditions. You could also directly connect every single button so that way you wouldn't have to change it if you want to change your code later. But for some reason, what's happening is even though that this button is telling this switch to turn on twice, and it is getting both signals and sending both signals up to this counter with conditions up here, it is not factoring it as passing. I don't know why it's happening. It is incorrect and it should be passing. Now we can delete our lights since we know that this system does work. So now if you're wanting to add sounds or noises or any other effects, whenever your player has either passed or failed the challenge, you're going to connect it up to here. And then you're just going to set it to whatever you need it to be, whether it's going to be conditions passed or conditions failed. You're just going to hook it up to that. And that is going to be it. This one is definitely a bit more complex than the other ones I have shown. I want them to just keep getting harder and harder as I go. I am learning new things. There is a lot of very simple scripting involved with these gizmos and gadgets, and it's fantastic. They're very easy to learn. Once you learn one thing, you learn another, and it just keeps coming quicker and quicker. And I think that is just fantastic. But again, that is going to be it. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. That really helps me out. If you learned anything new from the video, please subscribe. That also really helps me out. Don't forget to share it. You can also follow me on Twitter at DJKK. Thank you for watching and thank you for your support. Until next time, I'll see you.